and welcome once again to the Brett Chat Sport or BCS podcast. Following the Eagles' victory in Super Bowl 59, this episode is going to be a Philadelphia sports special. To help me with this, I've enlisted the help of Philly sports fan, the co-founder and co-host of the baseball podcast, Ethan Pechersky. And so without further ado, let's hear from me and Ethan Pechersky. Hey, Ethan, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me on, Brett.
So I will have introduced you as a Philly sports guy, so let's get right into it and talk all things Philadelphia. We are recording this a few days after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and I cannot begin to imagine how overjoyed you must have been at that.
So, yes, the Eagles won the Super Bowl about 3 days ago, I suppose. And I might be a little disappointing here, but I grew up a huge football fan. I love playing football. For the first 10 years of my life, it was my number one sport. I couldn't get enough of it. And then just a little bit about me, not that you probably care, but I have like a neck condition, so I can't play contact sports, which I didn't find out until I was about 10. And so then I couldn't play football anymore. And so my interest sort of waned just a little bit. I still love the sport, but baseball kind of took over for number one. So when the Phillies won the World Series in 2008, I was absolutely overjoyed, which is probably the reaction you're looking for right now. So that was my peak of sports fandom. And now when the Eagles win the Super Bowl, when the Flyers went to the Stanley Cup, I was very happy, but I wasn't climbing up the lampposts on Broad Street and getting hurt and stuff. I'm leaving that to other people. But it was a lot of fun to watch. It was not as exciting of a game as when they won in 2017. That was probably the best Super Bowl I've ever seen in my life. But it was a fun watch. And it's one of those things where I'm very excited for all the people around me. I have a bunch of people, my in-laws are huge Eagles fans, and they were going nuts and everything. So I was enjoying it, and it's just a lot of fun to watch a good football game, which it was somewhat of that.
Yeah. You've just raised a very interesting point. What is it with you people in Philadelphia and wanting to climb up greased light poles?
I don't know if I can answer that, seeing as I've never done it. Philadelphia has a long history of they were throwing snowballs at Santa Claus, I think in the 80s, and they hate J.D. Drew because he didn't sign with the Phillies like 25 years ago or 30 years ago. It's something you're bored into. I remember as a little kid going to games at Citizens Bank Park and booing people who I didn't actually know who they were, but everybody else was booing, and so I was booing. And as an adult, you realize maybe that's not the nicest thing in the world to do, but it's just the culture you're steeped in, which it has pros and cons. It's nice to see people get passionate, but also sometimes it's too much passion,
Yeah, and it was we got the pictures of the celebrations over here in the UK, and it was it's a very passionate fan base. I will certainly say that. I'll put that diplomatically.
If I can sidetrack you for just a second, I think you'll enjoy just a quick anecdote. I went to high school with a girl whose father, probably 25 years ago, was drunk and fell over the glass into the penalty box at a Flyers game and got in a fight with Ty Domi, who was a player on the Blue Jays. And there's clips of it online. You can see it. And it was interesting to see a grown man get drunk enough that he got in a fist fight with a professional athlete. So I know that family. So that was an interesting. That's what it's like around here.
Okay, so let's get into that a little bit. Like, Philadelphia has got a very particular reputation when it comes to being a sports town. I'll put this diplomatically because I don't necessarily agree with all of the joke making and the kind of like the ridicule that Philadelphia can get as a sports town. But you are a very particularly passionate fan base, and that's not to say that fan bases in other cities aren't passionate. Like I've been to multiple sporting occasions in Boston, and they love their sports. The same is certainly true of people in Chicago, people in New York, but Philadelphia as a sports town seems to have this very particular image where it is set apart from other sports towns. It gets made fun of a lot. What do you think it is about Philadelphia and its fan base that you are that subject of ridicule and you are kind of marked out as being particularly passionate and enthusiastic, to put it that way, about your sports teams?
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong about anything you said. I think it's probably people like to say politics are downstream of culture. I think sports are also downstream of culture. And so it has a lot to do with the culture of Philadelphia. And I don't know if you're super familiar with Bill Burr, the comedian, but he
I
talks
am.
about how he's from Boston and people are angry all the time because it's so cold. And so you just don't have it in you to be nice. When you're walking the street at 70 degrees, it's a lot different than when you're walking on the street and you want to kill yourself because it's so cold. And I think there's something to that. So it's I think it's a regional thing for the most part. Boston, I found to be a lot of the same way. New York to be the same way. And then when you go down south, you go out west, people are calmer and slower and nicer. And that's a place that I think a lot more people would want to live than Philadelphia.
But yeah, I would never ridicule the people of Philadelphia, even though I would say the sports fixtures that I've been to in Philadelphia, you are more abusive of the
Yeah.
opposition. I will say
Yeah.
that. Like, I can remember being at a 76ers game and I was having this perfectly pleasant conversation with this guy. Like I'd accidentally sat in the wrong seat and I was actually in row 5, seat 7, not row 7, seat 5.
Sure.
Perfectly pleasant conversation with this guy. I moved 2 rows down and then game starts, and this was when Lonzo Ball, who now plays for my team, the Bulls, was playing for the Pelicans. And this guy who had been perfectly lovely 5 minutes earlier, my goodness, I am not going to repeat the things that he called Lonzo Ball, and
Yeah.
even more so, Lonzo Ball's mother.
Yeah, that's a phenomenon you definitely run into around here. People kind of flip the switch, and they know when to turn on the I guess, like you said, to be diplomatic, maybe the attitude of being a sports fan. It's very similar to politics. Like there are a lot of people that are very nice people and you can chat with, and just stay away from politics. They'll get upset. That's kind of how it is with sports sometimes. I know some wonderful people, and then as soon as they say, oh, well, my dad's from Texas, so I'm a Cowboys fan. It's like, keep your mouth shut about it.
Oh
You
yeah,
know what
yeah.
I mean?
Definitely in Philadelphia, you should definitely keep your mouth shut about being a Cowboys fan.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, I haven't firsthand seen any physical altercations because of sports, but it's one of those things where every time somebody tells you a story, you go, "Yeah, I believe it." You know?
Yeah, and yeah, I'll agree with you there. From my limited experience, I would agree with you. Philadelphia is a lovely city. I've been there on multiple occasions. The people are wonderful as well. But yes, there does seem to be something that as soon as that whistle goes, people change, and
Yep.
not necessarily for the better, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Although what's kind of interesting, and I know that you're a baseball guy like me, at least to some degree. I don't know if you remember Cliff Lee. He was a really Cy Young pitcher on the Indians, and the Phillies signed him. And they traded for him, and then they traded him away. And then in 2010, I think, they signed him again, and he turned down more money from the Yankees and signed with the Phillies because he didn't want to play in New York. And I remember kind of scratching my head and going, I can understand not wanting to play in New York and maybe going down to Texas or Georgia or somewhere nice. I don't understand turning down New York to then go sign in Philadelphia. If you don't like the fan base in New York, I don't know if it's really much different in Philadelphia.
Sure. But okay, let's get back to the Eagles. As you say, like they've won. Like for me, I thought they were the best team this season. Like if the Patriots weren't playing, I would watch the Eagles. And even when the Patriots were playing, I would stay up and I would then watch the Eagles game that was at 9:25 my time over here, 4:25 your time. Just because the Eagles were that exciting and that good to watch. Like, what do you think needs to happen for that team to continue performing at that level next season and maybe defend the Super Bowl title?
Well, I think the good thing for Eagles fans is that obviously the big thing is people are going to say bring back Saquon Barkley. I know that running backs age not particularly well, and he's probably going to want a lot of money. I believe he's a free agent after this season, but I'm not 100% about that.
You have got him for 3 seasons.
Okay, see, I'm already off track, but either way, so you need Saquon to keep up his his production, which maybe 2,000 yards. I'm not sure about again, but he should be very good. Jalen Hurts seems to have taken a huge step forward. And I think a huge part of it, despite losing Jason Kelce, has been the offensive line. Jordan Mailata on at the left tackle position has been fantastic. And the center, who I'm blanking on his name, whatever.
Cam
You can
Akers.
Thank you. Has been fantastic in replacing Jason Kelce. And then they got two defensive backs in the draft this past season, Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell, I think. Marshall, something like that. I don't know. See, football is not my number one sport. But they have
I'm
they've turned
on
it
it as well, in fairness.
Yeah, yeah. But so, with the first Super Bowl in 2017, Carson Wentz was playing an MVP level and then he got hurt. And then Nick Foles came in and was incredible in the playoffs, but also we all know Nick Foles isn't Peyton Manning. So that was one where, it was the blueprint moving forward is going to look a little strange. This team should be back relatively the same roster construction. And, like you said, they look like the best team in football for most of the year. So I don't see a lot of problems. Obviously, winning a Super Bowl is hard and you can't guarantee it, but I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be favorites heading into next year.
So ultimately, it's just a case of Howie Roseman, who did a fantastic job of assembling that roster, as you said. It's him doing what he's been doing and making sure that the free agents that you can re-sign, you do, and those who don't re-sign, you find adequate replacements.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Howie Roseman has been a magician over the past, well, I know he's been here for a lot longer than that, but he's been a magician over the past 5 years to take, I remember as a kid never thinking the Eagles would win a Super Bowl and seeing them in 2004 lose to the Patriots and going, wow, that was a really good chance and they blew it. And then he was a magician to take that team to the Super Bowl, and then to do it again was kind of unbelievable to watch. And yeah, it's very strange. Like I remember as a kid looking around at people getting really excited for the Eagles season, in maybe 2010 and being like, I don't know. It's weird that there's hope for there's a good reason to have hope now.
Okay, and how do I put this? So you've got this fantastic team in the Eagles that's just won a Super Bowl, just going into the last game of the season, ending the season on a high. In terms of the two Philadelphia teams whose season is still in progress, the 76ers and the Flyers, I think it would be fair to say that the 76ers are not doing anywhere near as well as what anyone expected. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like a lot of basketball teams, the Pistons were this for a long time, where they keep trying to win, and every year they keep taking another step back because, guys will get hurt, guys will get older, and they keep throwing more money at the problem, bringing in more aging stars, and it's just not working. So the example this year is they brought in Paul George, who obviously had a fantastic career for the Pacers and the Clippers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. And they brought him in to pair with Maxey and Embiid, and now Embiid's battling knee issues. Paul George hasn't been playing like normal. They had this rookie named Jared McCain, who was really, really good, and then he's out for the year. And it's just not coming together. And you can see the core of the team is these big three guys, and then they keep bringing in more and more role players, I don't know, the Marcus Morrises of the world to try and plug the gaps. And it's just not happening. And so I think the Sixers now, I watched the game last night and, this is anecdotal evidence, but they were down by 2. Embiid gets a wide open 3 opportunity and then drives to the lane to try to get a 2, gets denied, and then the game's over. And it was like, that was kind of a microcosm of the Sixers season of what's going wrong for them, is they have these stars who just aren't doing what they're, I guess, capable of. And now they're 10 or 12 games below 500 or something. And they're, way far back of a playoff spot. I think if I were them, I'd probably try and go all, set myself up for next year's success and not try and bring in a couple more mid-tier guys at the trade deadline and try and win this year. But yeah, they've been a big disappointment, as have the Flyers, which I think is probably your next question.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that sticks out for me when it comes to the 76ers in particular is I looked at that roster before the season started, and to me, that was the best roster in the NBA. That was a roster that was built to win a championship. As you said, you have this big three of Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey, but then everyone underneath them has got experience. Kyle Lowry has won a championship. Caleb Martin, when he was still with them, had been to an NBA Finals, and he'd been to an NBA Finals only 2 seasons prior. So there was clearly experience there. There was clearly ability there. The problem was you get into the season and Embiid's not playing, and Paul George is injured, and then both of them come back, but then both of them end up getting injured again. You know, one question that I have to ask you is, the reason Embiid is injured, arguably, is because he goes to the Olympics in the summer as part of Team USA and wins himself a gold medal. As much as anyone would want to win an Olympic gold medal if they could, in hindsight, and I don't mean to lead you here, was it selfish of Embiid to not rehab that knee? Because he came back early for the playoffs last season. Was it selfish of him to go to the Olympics rather than actually rehabbing that knee so that he would be healthy for this season?
It's a good question, and I'm not 100%. I'm not super well versed in the rules surrounding international tournaments and the NBA. I'm with baseball. I know it down 100%, so I can use that as an example. I know that, for instance, for the World Baseball Classic, which is kind of the Olympics of baseball now, that teams are not allowed to tell a player no. If a player wants to play, he's allowed to play. Teams will really pressure a guy not to if they don't, an Embiid type guy who has injury history, and tell him they really don't want him to play. It would really be good for us not to have you play, but he ultimately has the decision. I don't know if that's the case in basketball, so I can't speak 100% to whose fault it actually is. I don't know if the Sixers gave him clearance and now are regretting it, or if he went off on his own despite them protesting. But to the point of your question, I don't ever want to blame a guy for playing in an international competition because, one, he's a human being, and I don't know the man personally, so I can't judge his motivations. Two, I think it's kind of amazing that this guy who came from Cameroon and then moved to France, and then later as an adult came to the United States. So really he could have played for 3 teams, I think. I'm not 100% sure how the eligibility rules work, but I know France was courting him. And he decided, no, I'm in the United States. This is where my career has been made. This country's given me a lot. I want to go play for them. I think that's wonderful. And it's not, and the Olympics are only every 4 years, and the NBA season is obviously every year. I understand the NBA is the one paying him millions and millions of dollars, so that is very important in his life. But you can't take the Olympics for granted. In 4 years, we don't know if he'll be healthy, if he'll even be productive. You know what I mean? Like who knows what'll happen. So when the opportunity comes along and he takes it, I don't want to fault the guy for that. In hindsight, obviously, I'm not a doctor, but it seems pretty clear that if he had rested more, his knee probably be in better shape. That's that's in a layman's terms, that seems to make sense to me. So in hindsight, yeah, you can second guess it, but at the time, I don't remember people raising a big issue about it and saying, how could Embiid do this? It's going to endanger the Sixers season. I kind of remember people just saying like, oh, cool, he's playing for the U.S. And that's it turned out the way it turned out. I don't know if he's the answer to all their problems anyway. Like a healthy Embiid, I still don't know if the Sixers are winning a championship if Embiid is playing 60 games this year instead of whatever he'll end up playing 30 or something.
I say we should move on. As you raised, the Flyers are not doing well either currently. They are bottom of the Metropolitan Division as we speak. Now, I don't pretend to be the world's biggest hockey expert, but one thing I do know is that the Flyers have become a bit of a byword in terms of the NHL for a team who aren't very good, a team that fail consistently. That's got to hurt as someone who is a Flyers fan.
Yeah, it's interesting. My father-in-law is a huge Flyers fan. Like he lives and dies by the Flyers. The Flyers are to him as the Phillies are to me. And so I've been watching a lot of Flyers this year, and I enjoy the Flyers. And it's kind of tough to watch them. They're an exciting team. They have a rookie named Matvei Michkov who's been phenomenal for the most part. And Travis Konechny is he's amazing. He was an all-star. And they don't have a lot around it, and so they've been kind of in this rebuild. I know, in like you're an Oakland A's fan, so you're familiar with rebuilds. And
Unfortunately,
sorry,
they're not called the Oakland A's anymore, which but
that's
we won't
you're
dwell
right.
on that. We will
You're
not dwell on
a
that.
Sacramento Athletics fan, yeah.
Yeah.
But the Flyers, they've been in a rebuild for a little while, and last year they were kind of doing the same thing where they were like teetering on the edge of maybe being able to sneak into the playoffs, and they ended up trading away a couple guys at the trade deadline for future draft picks. And I think that's the smart way to do it. Like, yeah, you could sneak in, be like the 16th team into the playoffs, and then get smoked in the first round. Does that help anything? You know what I mean? Like, at that point, I would rather sell off the pieces that you can right now and do better in 2026 or 2027, because it's just not a very good team. It's really the goaltending is the problem. I don't know how deep you want to get into hockey, but the games can be kind of exciting, and then other teams will score like 2 straight goals like within a minute, and then they're out of gas.
No, please do expand upon that. Like, if you want to talk about the issues that the Flyers are having, what is preventing them from taking that next step? Let's get into that.
Yeah, if you want to real fast, I am not a hockey expert, so I can't go super deep into the weeds. But as far as I can tell, it's really the goaltending is the problem. They had a kid named Carter Hart who was really, really good. Well, I mean, I don't know how amazing he was because I'm not a hockey expert, but he was a solid player, and he was their up and coming goaltender, going to be around for a long time. And then he got caught up in these allegations out of Canada. Him and a couple other players were accused of crimes. I don't know how serious you want to get with it. But so he hasn't played in the NHL since then. It's been like a year and a half. So now they have this guy named Sam Ersson, who's been pretty good, but like he's no Carter Hart. And then like in hockey, you can't play the same goalie every day. It's like a catcher. You know what I mean? You can't run him out there every day. He's going to get banged up. And so they just got nothing behind Carter Hart. They have this kid named Fedotov, who's just not any good behind him. It's one of those things. I don't know enough about hockey. I don't know if it's a young guy who's going to get better and they just got to wait it out, or if they just need to bring somebody in. But it's just not, it's not working out for him.
Yeah, and so what do you see as being the answer to the Flyers' issues then? Like, what do they need to do to get better?
See, this is one where I wish I knew a little bit more about hockey to be able to give you a serious answer. Like, I can sit here and say goaltending's the problem. I'm not sure what the best way to go about that is. Like, I don't know enough about hockey to say, oh, this guy's going to be a free agent, go sign him. Or you're just going to have to get lucky in the draft or make a trade. I'm not sure what the way to do it is, to be honest with you. Yeah, I guess I have to leave my answer at that. I'm a bad guest in this specific instance.
No, that is absolutely fair enough. So we'll move on from the teams that are in the midst of their season, and let's move on to your specialist subject. Let's talk about the team that is preparing to go into the new season, the Philadelphia Phillies. Like, they are, has to be said, one of the best teams in baseball the last couple of years. Like, what are your hopes? What are your dreams? What are your realistic expectations for the Phillies in 2025?
I think a realistic expectation for the Phillies, and I'm not saying that I'm predicting this is going to happen, but a realistic goal that you can give the Phillies to say do this or the season is a failure is win the World Series. It's not that often in baseball that you get a team that's good enough that the Yankees are a famous example of World Series or bust mentality every year. The Phillies are clearly in that discussion right now where they went to the World Series in 2022. They kind of had no business being there, but they pulled a rabbit out of their hat and they went to the World Series. 2023, they were 1 win away from the World Series and they blew it. And then this year, they were one of the best teams in baseball, and they were clearly the best team in the National League East. And they just face planted in the first round of the playoffs against the Mets. And it's one where, you look at that result and you think big changes need to be made, but then you look at this, like the roster that they have, and you go, no, this is a World Series team. They just need to execute. So they made a few moves. They brought in Jesus Luzardo from the Marlins, who should be a big upgrade to the rotation. They were rolling the corpse of Taijuan Walker out there to just get shelled every fifth day. So Jesus Luzardo will be good. And they brought in Max Kepler from the Twins to help out in the outfield. I don't know how perfect of a fit that is, but he's a good player, so we'll see how it goes. And then, other than that, I think it's just you have the guys you have: Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola. You have a lot of stars. Go out there and play like it. That I see now. I'm being a little bit of the Philadelphian that you brought up earlier. I'm saying no. I don't want excuses. I don't want a division title and then getting smoked in the first round. I don't want to lose in the NLCS. I want you to go win the World Series. And that's where we're at. This team. it's a pretty old roster, and it's a highly paid roster. They're probably not going to bring in a bunch of stars. They were out on Juan Soto this past offseason, so they're probably not going to make a bunch of huge additions coming up. They just, this is what you have. Go win the World Series in the next couple of years before Harper and Wheeler and everything are gone or not productive anymore. So was that an impassioned enough take for being a Philadelphia fan?
Yeah, it's always good it's always good to have fans' true opinions on this, and for them to exhibit their passion. That's what I want this podcast to be about, is fans and demonstrating their knowledge and showing their passion. What I would say is, you talked there about the Phillies being the best team in the National League East in 2024, but then just not executing in that first playoff series versus the Nets. What for you is the thing that is standing in the way of them executing when it really counts them?
Well, I think I'm going to have to shameless plug here. We did an entire episode on my podcast breaking down the Phillies' failure in 2024. And we actually did the same thing in 2023, too. So if people want, they can go watch that. But just to give you the long and the short of it, the Phillies have a bad tendency to swing at bad pitches. And I know that in the series against the Mets this past postseason, the bullpen kind of let them down. But it was one of those things where the bullpen could have pitched as well as he wanted him to. They just were not scoring any runs. And so the Phillies chase a lot of bad pitches, and it's interesting. Like, I don't know how many Phillies games you watched last year, but in the first half of the year, they boat raced the rest of the league. They were amazing. I think they had the best record in baseball for a while, and they were clearly a top 3 or 5 team in baseball. And as soon as the All-Star break hit, I think one series before that against your Athletics, they went out there and just got crushed. And then ever since then, that was the
I didn't want to bring it up, but I definitely remember it. Yes,
that was the Lawrence Butler game where he had 3 home runs. But they have a tendency to just swing out of the zone and just chase wildly. And Trea Turner is sort of the target of fans' ire when this happens, because who's a very good player, but he goes out there and will just. Tom and I, who's the co-host of my podcast, talk about this all the time. How they'll go out there, first pitch will be out of the zone, and they'll swing wildly at it. And so now you're down 0-1. And then the next pitch will be right down the middle, and they'll take it because they want to get back in the count. Now you're down 0-2, and the pitcher can just, now you're silly putty. He'll just do whatever he wants with you. This is anecdotal evidence. It's obviously more than that, but it's really frustrating to watch the Phillies just flail wildly. Like, pitching is not the problem. The starting rotation has been fantastic. The bullpen was the best in baseball. They had a bad couple of games against the Mets, but it was the offense where, it's the pitcher's getting in that mode where if you give up 1 run, you're going to lose the game because your offense is just not scoring runs. And so it's not that they need to bring in a bunch more hitters. They have stars. They just need to hit the baseball.
Yeah, so you've said a couple of minutes ago that this is an older roster. This a lot of these guys are experienced. They've been around the show for a long time. Why are they swinging at bad pitches then when they've got all of this experience, and you would think would know better?
So that's an excellent question. And living here and being a fan of the Phillies and having all my friends be fans of Phillies and listening to Phillies podcasts and everything, that is the burning question every summer of if you know why. It's kind of like, asking, a gambling addict, why do you keep going to the casino or something? Like, well, sometimes you just can't stop yourself. And it's, when you're Nick Castellanos, who does this a lot too, and you see a pitch coming, and you think it's going to be a fastball right down the middle, and you take a hack at it, and it ends up being a slider in the dirt. You sit there and you kick yourself, and you go, why did I swing at that? And then the same thing happens the next day. And it's part of it is that every pitcher in the major leagues is really talented. It can make anybody look foolish. Like, I am not sitting here as a fan saying that I could do better. I know that. But part of it is that it's just baseball is hard, and that's part of it. And also, I always hesitate to climb inside a guy's head and tell you what his mentality is because I'm not there. I don't know these people. But, part of it could be that, like you said, these are experienced guys who are well paid. And I'm sure there's a tendency for, Bryce Harper's not really the problem, but Trea Turner, who's making $27 million a year, it's probably easy for a guy like that to say, doing what I do got me $27 million a year and a World Series ring with the Nationals. I'm going to keep doing it because that's gotten me where I've gotten to. And, maybe that's a reason why they're not adjusting, or maybe they put a lot of pressure on themselves because the team expects, or I'm sorry, because the city expects a championship. I don't know. Maybe part of it is just that baseball's hard, and you can play really well in July, and Sean Manaea, who's hasn't been that good of a pitcher over his career, comes out and has a strange new delivery and shuts you down in October. Like, I don't know. I don't have the answers. It's for Kevin Long as their hitting coach, and he's supposed to be some sort of savant, and it's for Kevin Long to figure it out.
Well, I mean, you've kind of got into my next question, though. The thing I was going to ask is this a coaching thing, maybe? If this is happening throughout the lineup, is there an issue with the coaching, or is there perhaps an issue with the culture of the organization then?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like I said, I'm not in meetings with these guys. I don't know any of these people, so I can't diagnose exactly what Trea Turner's problem is or what Kevin Long is or isn't teaching him. When Tom and I did an episode on the Phillies failure in the postseason, we did talk about how this might be a sad byproduct of the way that the business is run in sports. But Trea Turner's making $27 million a year, and he's signed to a contract. You can't get rid of him. You shouldn't, because he's a good player. But even if you wanted to, and you're really that mad at him, you can't get rid of him because you're stuck with all that money. Kevin Long, you can get rid of. I don't know if you should or not. I don't know the man, but he's one that you can fire and bring in somebody else and doesn't really affect anything. So when stuff like this happens, and the Diamondbacks beat you when you shouldn't, and then the Mets beat you when they shouldn't, and now you're sitting here going, well, we've done the same thing 2 years in a row, and it's we face planted both times, and it seems to be the same issue with the hitting. You can't really get rid of the hitters. You can get rid of the coach. So that's what a lot of people wanted to do. The Phillies didn't go that direction. In fact, I think they gave a lot of their coaching staff new contracts heading into the season. So I actually heard it said on a podcast, and I think this was a great way of putting it, of the Phillies doubled down on their coaching staff. And so they're basically telling, the media and the fans and the players, this is not the coach's fault. If we thought it were the coach's fault, we would have gotten rid of the coaches. They're still here. So whose fault is it? It's the players. So figure it out. I don't know if that's true. I'm not in the meetings, but it sounds good to me.
Okay then. Well, let's circle back to the beginning. Like we talked at the beginning about Philadelphia being a particularly passionate sports town, and you've alluded to it in your answers about the Philadelphia Phillies. Is that a part of the problem? Do you think? Do you think the weight of expectation, the pressure, the passion of the fans, where they can be, and I've seen this, with Trea Turner, where they have been very crisp with him, but they've also been passionately supportive of him as well. Is, without putting this on you and your fellow fans, are you part of the problem, possibly?
Whatever the issue is, I'm usually part of the problem, so don't feel bad. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of the answer. Philadelphia has a strange way of relating to athletes where, when the fans are mad at you and you wrong them somehow. I brought up JD Drew earlier, who never even played for the Phillies, but they felt wronged by him because he didn't want to sign with them when they drafted him. And so he will be hated in the city for, henceforth. And that's kind of the way it is sometimes. But then also, they're willing to have your back no matter what, even if you're not winners. So the 1993 Phillies, they went to the World Series when they kind of had no business being there. The year before, they were terrible. The year after, they weren't very good. But in 1993, it was just lightning in a bottle for some reason. And they went to the World Series and they lost against the Blue Jays. And that team kind of lives on forever. Even though they didn't actually win the championship, people still love Kurt Schilling and John Kruk and Jim Eisenreich and Mickey Morandini and all these guys who aren't really Hall of Famers, but they were just good players for the Phillies, and they gave people, a run that was a lot of fun. And I think that's how people will look back on the 2022 Phillies. They'll always love Rhys Hoskins and Bryce Harper, even if they don't win a ring. But when you're in the midst of it and it feels like you should win a ring, that's probably the difference, is that the 93 Phillies, nobody had any expectations of them to go to the World Series. So then when they did it, people went, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And they got all on board. And then when you come up just short, it was a good run though. And that's how it felt with the 2022 Phillies. And now we're squarely in the time frame of, you need to win the World Series. The owner, they run a top 5 payroll in baseball, I think maybe number 6, something like that. But they spend a lot of money. The owner has no qualms about spending money. And they brought in a general manager in Dave Dombrowski who has won rings before, and he has, a reputation for going all out to win a World Series. And so it's, like the mandate from ownership is clear: win the World Series. And so that's, I think, when people get kind of trigger happy to just blame the players, when they're going like, the money's there, the players are there, the big names are there. Where's the World Series ring? And so that's why when Trea Turner comes in and starts popping everything up and, swinging pitches outside of the strike zone, that's when people start to say, you're getting paid $300 million. Figure out a way to lay off the slider in the dirt.
Okay, I think that's a good place to end our sports chat, Ethan. You may remember that in the first episode of this series, the Super Bowl 59 preview, we heard from Ross Worsley, who said that Philadelphia was his, quote, most hated sports city. Here is more of that conversation and what I then asked him following his assertion. My experience of Philadelphia as a sports city is that there seems to be a lot more passion. There seems to be a lot more rowdiness. In many ways, it reminded me of going to sports fixtures in the UK. Actually, do you see that yourself, or do you think it's just something that's very unique to Philadelphia?
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah, I would never go to a Giants Eagles game in Philadelphia. Especially not wearing any Giants gear. Whereas I think maybe other than Dallas, any other game I would probably go and wouldn't expect too much animosity. But yeah, Eagles fans, they definitely look at the coach. Last year, he got them to a Super Bowl, and obviously last year it ended really badly. And even this year they win a game, I think, against the Panthers where they didn't win by much. The fans are going nuts for the coach to sort it out, and there seems to be a very short fuse on their fans compared to like other cities, and I think that just seems to be a Philadelphia thing.
I am all about being fair and balanced in this podcast as much as I can. So let's end this episode by hearing from another sports fan who has a more positive view of Philadelphia as a sports city. Here is what Eagles fan Jessie Deopp had to say about the reputation of Philadelphia and its fans.
So Philly sports fans are passionate. We're all in, we're vocal, and we're proud. Yes, we're absolutely passionate. We're absolutely proud. Grit and resilience defines the city, defines Philadelphia. There's no room for casual fans. Could you imagine going to a game and just politely clapping for the team or the players and moving on? No chance in Philadelphia. We all know that wild celebrations happen everywhere. A few bad apples don't define us. Will not define us. I mean, look. We had such a wonderful experience yesterday. Obviously, I wasn't there, but from what I've seen, what I've heard, almost everyone I know went. There was 1 million people, million+ people went to the Super Bowl parade yesterday. No major issues happened. But of course, the bad moments get the headlines. If it bleeds, it reads. Brotherly love runs deep, and the sports unite the city. I can't even tell you that it literally isn't my DNA. Go Birds is a greeting for good morning, good afternoon, and thank you. We say good birds instead of thank you. My childhood revolved around games and watching the games with my family every Sunday afternoon or evening. And look at Rocky. We gave, Philadelphia gave the world one of the best underdog movies of all time, Rocky. And Philadelphia is an underdog city. And Philly is the biggest small town. Philly sports connect everyone. Everyone bleeds green, bleeds red, depending on whatever is in season. So the bottom line, we wouldn't want it any other way. We are very passionate and we're very proud. Go Birds.
That's the end of another episode of the BCS podcast. As always, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye bye now. The BCS podcast is written, produced, edited and hosted by me, Brett Walker. Thank you to Boris Anderoff and Pixabay for the use of the music and sound effects in this podcast. This week's main guest was Ethan Pechersky and also features contributions from Jessie Deopp and Ross Worsley.